Now I'm curious, especially Arnie, since you hold so much of this stock, when Kris says, I think they're going to be able to have more avenues than both Intel and Nvidia. My question is, where is their software play? Because one of the things that gets me so excited about Nvidia is they're so heavily involved in AI software and the Omniverse. Do we know, or I mean, you follow AMD, so what are they doing from a software perspective?
Well, for the software perspective, we're more interested in becoming the partner of choice for all the cloud providers. And right now, they made another very smart acquisition called Pensando, which seemed overpriced because they spent $2 billion for a company that was very early, but was already a leader in the segment, which basically helps managing through software the optimization of the cloud computing. This, so I said, very, very simple. AWS has a solution like that is very powerful, called Nitro, if I remember correctly. And this is the focus entry, like AMD wants to become the partner of choice, having all the product line with the power of the software empowering all the solutions.
Mm-hmm. Now, we also were talking about Taiwan and China and the impact that both Nvidia, AMD, and other companies would be affected if China were to try to take over Taiwan, or even Taiwan Semiconductor in the country, and overall what they could do if they took over and owned all of that, what that would do to the American economy as well as those companies. Do you see any of those companies bringing stuff back to the States to avoid that risk? And does that concern you? Because it's really my only bear thesis on AMD and Nvidia is that I believe they are very dependent on Taiwan Semiconductor for creating their chips. They design them, but Taiwan Semiconductor creates them.
I'm worried too. And that is why I have a big chunk of Palantir, which I consider like a natural edge to that to happen. I am mentally aware that if attention arises there, I will switch like a no-brainer to Palantir, because right now, basically, the real risk of my portfolio is Apple and AMD relying on Taiwan. So I know that Palantir would be not affected or affected positively. So I'm really mentally aware, okay, if an escalation rises, I know what to do. If an escalation doesn't rise, I'm still fine, because right now I'm extremely confident in having both Apple and AMD.
Yeah, there's one segment that I think a lot of people are starting to realize, and that's the risk of deglobalization that's currently happening. One of the larger trends that I see is that a lot of countries are becoming more insulated from how we used to do things almost 10, 20 years ago. So here's an example. C Limited, great company, great growth prospects, everything is good. And then one day India decided, hey, we're going to ban this specific game that C Limited was generating a significant portion of their profits was, right? And now all of a sudden C Limited gets clobbered, right? This is not something that would have happened 20 years ago. But guess what? Every country right now is taking more defensive tactics on how they're doing things for political ramifications. So a lot of investors, they don't necessarily take the politics into their investing equation. And if they don't do it, that's problematic. And that's one of the reasons that I'm very concerned about both AMD and Nvidia because of that, because of their large exposure to their supply chain being so focused on China, right? If any person is telling you, hey, just look at the numbers, don't worry about the whole China thing, clearly this Russia invasion shows you the exact opposite. Yeah. Like, hey, anything can change at a moment's notice, right? Yeah. So that has to kind of be put into its own category these days also. So I think right now we're going into an age of deglobalization, or even to a certain degree, like the world is becoming more bipolar. So if you're investing in a company that has a significant presence in China, and all of a sudden tomorrow China says, hey, guess what? We don't like that a foreign company is making money in our country, and we're going to support our local companies more, you got a problem. So if a significant portion of your company's profits are coming from a country that is unstable or is too like protective of its own interests versus, protecting the sanctity of international business, then that's something to really consider. Like, yeah, and it happened with the US too. Like, look at us. We put a whole bunch of tariffs on China, right? Because they were doing a whole bunch of things under Trump. So a lot of investors, they thought, oh, you know what, the US market is always going to be a completely open market. And that's not necessarily what happened. So I think that's one of those limiting factors. And I think that's one of the calculations that Intel is making in developing so many foundries in the US. And that's why a lot of companies are actually moving their chip manufacturing to the US. So it's not.
You make a good point right here. Sorry to jump in here, but you make a great point about the foundries and what Intel's doing a little differently. I would love your guys' take on also something that's very similar and relative is people now are talking on FinTwit about what could possibly be the damaging causes to the Shanghai shutdowns for Tesla, and possibly even what if China doesn't want Tesla to win in something like NIO or Xpeng or something else? And one of the things that Elon made agreed upon with the Chinese government was, we'll operate in your country, but you will not have autonomy or control over anything of the organizations. It will be a US run business in your country and owned that way. And if let's just say Tesla got kicked out of China, does that change the growth thesis and everything else? And my answer was, you still got Berlin, you still got Austin, and they're going to keep building more and more. And it's not just a car company. What are your guys' thoughts?
I absolutely agree that with China, there are both great opportunities and great risks. Also, Apple is very reliant on China, and probably right now is the best growth engine, both in terms of App Store, in terms of direct sales of the iPhone, and advertising, which is still a very small component, but I think it will be incredibly valuable, especially when you can reach the Chinese audience. But to operate, Apple agreed with the government to give them the data, which in the US would be completely impossible. So it's like selling the soul to the Chinese Communist Party. So that is why when investing in Apple or in Tesla, we should be aware that that is a huge risk. But if the things start going bad, maybe it's worth reacting.
But do you think Tesla could survive that?
I'm not deep enough on Tesla, but I saw that right now the China manufacturing is actually the most profitable one. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you're right on that. And they were planning on expanding in Shanghai.
So, well, China helps manufacturing because you can have crazy scale. So Chinese customers spend a lot, but yes, there is a risk. In luxury, I saw that emerging much more. I saw some charts of Chinese brands taking over a small component of Nike market share, but took a lot of market share from Adidas. So the Chinese market is extremely competitive, and the moment people don't like you, you're out.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, one of the reasons why I think China agreed to let Tesla do whatever Tesla needed to do in China was that they understood that they were not going to be able to get Elon Musk to give up the technology, right? It's not going to happen. But there is a significant infrastructure, a significant portion of development around EVs that China wanted to have. So basically what happened is, if you want to encourage your people to drive EVs, you need to give them the option to buy the best EV out there. So then everyone is going to be able to adopt EVs more readily until your industries catch up. Once those industries catch up to making an equivalent product, then the question is, okay, how are we going to exercise this Tesla from our economy and give our guys the what is that thing called, the leg up in becoming the market share leaders. So I think right now China made a calculated play in saying, let's allow Tesla to come in, develop the industry. Our companies will get a secondary high from becoming EV, being able to explore EVs. Our population will move towards EVs at a much faster pace. And then after that, once there is enough of attraction to the EV market, then we'll start making the moves against Tesla. Because I think the day is coming. I think one day, I'm not sure when it's going to be, when the Chinese government says to Tesla, makes a demand of Tesla, and Tesla says no, and the Chinese government will utilize that as a rationale for nationalizing certain properties or certain aspects of, or making them do things that they don't want. So an example is Apple right now. Apple's biggest vulnerability is that they can't say fuck you to China. Go ahead, try to say fuck you to China. Who's got the power dynamic in the Apple-China relationship right now? Is it Apple or is it China? Right now, the Chinese could very easily say, you know what, Apple, we don't want your products in our country anymore. Goodbye.
Apple needs them. Apple needs that economy of scale and that market.
Yeah. Yep. So right now, I think Tesla, because of his technology, has the advantage in that negotiating power dynamic. But over time, that's going to diminish. And once it's diminished completely, now the Chinese have you by the balls. So
I like what you said there, that they have a lot of pollution within China, and they have a lot of credits and things to drive EVs in their country to kind of reduce on that with all the carbon footprint there. And so if you want people to drive EVs, you bring the best of the best over, get customers experiencing that, so that way that can grow. I haven't heard of that perspective, but that makes a lot of sense of why they were so easily welcomed in and said, okay, you run things your way, we'll support you, because that will get, and we, eventually we will have all EVs everywhere, but in time, and I don't want to get political, but I definitely don't think that we should be forcing it and forcing it before it's ready to actually standardize that across the board.
Yeah, and
but
that's
just
the
needed to
thing.
push some competitive pressure to make all their own BYD and so on. Okay, this is the yardstick. We need to become much better. Otherwise, Tesla will take all the market share.
Yep,
and by
exactly.
doing that, BYD, NIO, and so on are super incentivized. They can't allow Tesla to take all the market share out there.
Yeah, you need healthy competition, and that's what Tesla is to a lot of them. So I think China's eventual goal is to have a large EV manufacturing base. But in order to get to that position, you need a dark horse like Tesla to motivate you to keep improving your technologies, because it's almost like, oh, guess what? We have a domestic company, but that domestic company is competing against this other company until there is a closer level of market share and the industry is mature enough to then kick the other people out. So, it's a very similar thing to, I think, cell phones too, right? Like cell phones right now, Huawei probably controls more market share in China than Apple does by a large margin. I have to look at what the market share is. But yeah, like I said, I think any country right now that wants to develop an industry, invite the company that's the best in the world into your economy, get your companies to mimic them, and then kick them out later, and you've got yourself an industry that you didn't necessarily have to grow organically.
So